Should you get an Oxy-Fuel torch?
Should you get a plasma cutter?
These are the questions we ask each other all the time. But for you, making that choice can be a difficult decision. So we'll break it down for you. We'll start with some process fundamentals and then go into some of the reasons why you should choose
Plasma
or Oxy-Fuel. All right, let's talk about Oxy-Fuel. Simply put, Oxy-Fuel combines oxygen with a fuel to create a heat source to take the material that you're working with to its kindling temperature. That's the temperature at which it can start burning, essentially. You depress the cutting oxygen lever, that adds a focused stream of oxygen into the plate, allowing it to have an exothermic process, what I call accelerated rusting.
Yeah.
Victor introduced the modern Oxy-Fuel regulator back in 1913 because the founder of the company wanted to provide a safer product to the market. Since then, we've invented built-in flashback arresters, built-in check valves, and most recently, the safest, most durable regulator on the market, the Edge 2.0. Here's a couple of reasons why you should look at the Oxy-Fuel process first. Cost effectiveness. You can get into an Oxy-Fuel outfit for as little as a few $100s. It has everything that you need. Durability. The torches that we've manufactured over the years have actually been handed down from generation to generation.
True.
And the guy's talking about, this is the product that my granddad used.
I've had mine for 30 years.
There you see, that's exactly what it is. Also, Edge 2.0 has a lifetime warranty. Ability to cut thick and thin material. Easily you can cut up to 8-inch material. Interestingly enough, we were just at a job, we were cutting 48-inch material.
48, wow.
Process flexibility. Do you need to heat, cut, weld? All you have to do is work with a different attachment or different consumables based on what you're needing. The last and most important reason is the go anywhere portability, because you don't need electricity.
Yeah.
You can carry this product into the most remote parts of the world, which is happening every day today.
When you have access to electricity though, man, plasma starts to become a very interesting proposition to be your first purchase, right? So plasma cuts with compressed air. So you're gonna start with that, typically shop air. That's forced through a small orifice in the end of the torch. And when you add that electricity we've been talking about through that special electrode, it creates a high velocity jet of plasma gas. And I reach temperatures up to 20,000 degrees or more.
We're not quite there.
No, you're not there. We're basically a controlled lightning bolt and you've got a flame. So there's the difference in the temperature. The difference is though, from a functionality standpoint, is I can cut anything that's electrically conductive. I'm not just relying on that exothermic reaction that John was talking about. Thermal Dynamics invented the plasma cutting electrode in 1957, so I'm a little younger than you are.
Baby.
We introduced the modern inverter-based plasma cutter though in the 80s, and that has come a long way. What you see behind me, smaller, 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 with more and more power coming out of that unit. And so Thermal Dynamics Cutmasters have been synonymous with cutting innovation. And so here are some of those top reasons you want to choose a plasma cutter, right? So easy to use, first of all. The Cutmaster Plus offers lightweight portability, intuitive controls, and the torch is basically a point-and-click cutting tool. Specialty applications such as grate cutting, gouging, right? We'll touch on that. Any type of metal removal that you need to do with those electrically conductive materials, right? So material flexibility, that's the next one. Steel, rusty material, stainless, aluminum, brass, copper, titanium, you name it. If it can conduct electricity, it can cut it and slice right through it. It really doesn't care. So precision, plasma delivers clean cuts for better part fit up, has a narrow, very narrow heat affected zone and no warping. And the number one reason you want to consider a plasma cutter is productivity. Blazing fast cutting speed. So anytime you got high volume work for materials from say gauge to even a little over an inch, plasma cutter is a money making machine. So Cutmaster at the end of the day delivers more cutting power pound for pound, maybe, in those thickness ranges. He mentioned some 8-inch.
Yeah,
I know I can't touch 8-inch
How about 48?
with these. 48 I definitely can't. I could carve off little sections at a time.
It'll take a little while.
It'll take a minute. Let's get out in the shop and do some comparisons between these products. We're gonna compare cutting thin to thick materials in mild steel, stainless, aluminum, and then provide an assessment of the pros and cons of each of those processes. So depending on the thicknesses, plasma cuts as fast as you can move just about, right? So when you're talking really thin material, it cuts as fast as you can move, easily 50 to even more than 100 inches a minute. So further, plasma cutting starts cutting instantly. There is no preheat. Pull the trigger and start cutting. So that makes a superior choice for high volume projects.
All right, I'll admit, Oxy-Fuel is a little bit slower. Plus, you do have to account for, as he was talking about, the preheat time. You do have to preheat the material. We talked about getting it to kindling temperature before you start the process. That is an issue in many cases, so it will slow you down on jobs where you have a lot of starts and stops. However, once you get into thicker material, Oxy-Fuel really starts to give you a better advantage. I can cut steel with just a basic outfit to up to 8-inch material. That's really easy to do. All you need to do on a basic outfit to go from, let's say, 1/4-inch material up to 8-inch material is just change the cutting tip. So this is a small investment to be able to go from one to the other.
Yeah, and in my case, you'd have to pretty much buy a whole nother machine if you had to get really thick, right? So all of my smaller machines can cut up to 1/2 inch in all cases, no matter what, 30, 50, 70, you can cut that type of material. But once you start talking about thicknesses like he's got, it's gonna be a problem, right? So you're gonna have to make either that bigger investment or you're completely limited and really can't do it in plasma.
Well, and I'm gonna tell you, he's gigging me on a few things, but I will tell him, other part that you have to look at, like the Cutmaster, it's got a very impressive 60% duty cycle.
That's true. My duty cycle's high, but Oxy's got 100% duty cycle. You turn it on, it's cutting.
You're limited to you, how long you're going to stay under the hood and
under
how long you're going to
work. Yeah, so I'll concede. So very thick materials, Oxy-Fuel wins. But when it comes to parts per hour and meeting deadlines, productivity, and if that material's under 1 inch, I think I've got you beat on the productivity.
You're doing good. There's no doubt about that.
All this banter reminds me of something, though, that very few people actually think about as far as a process goes.
I bet I know.
Reading my mind?
Yeah. Gouging? Yes.
I was first introduced to Oxy-Fuel gouging almost 30 years ago, and it blew me away. Then when you talk about plasma cutting gouging, same thing, except now I'm not limited to some of those mild steel-based materials, right? I can get in hard-facing, scarfing rivet heads, frozen bolts, all that type of thing I know it can do with plasma as well. But there's a few things in gouging that Oxy-Fuel gouging can do that I can't do.
Yep. Gouging is a great way to remove welds, worn surfaces, rivet removal, anything like that, or just even repairing a surface for repair. The tip selection comes down to how big of a gouge you want to make, both in terms of the depth or the width that you're working with. These tips are designed so that they're bent, so that when you're washing that out, it will come out just the way you want it to work with.
Yep, and plasma tips come in 4 different styles to kind of try to accomplish that same thing, right? Where I've got A, B, C, D size tips that are gonna widen out that plasma arc, make it a little bit rougher air pattern flowing out the end of that torch, but I can't get near as wide of a gouge as you can with Oxy-Fuel. So there is a little bit of limitation or a change in how you approach that. I'm going to create depth with angle of my torch head and width with motion.
We talked about gouging, but another often underlooked application is piercing.
Yeah.
So Oxy-Fuel does a great job with this. If you got a situation where I've got a piece of plate, I need to cut a hole in the center, I want to start it right there.
So plasma can do that too. Remember, as soon as you pull that trigger, you're cutting. So technique is going to play a high role in both Oxy-Fuel and plasma when you're trying to pierce that hole. For example, one of the reasons you may want to pierce is to create a series of holes maybe for plug welds. That's quite nice, especially when you're doing thin materials and doing like an overlap weld. Classic cars comes to mind when you want to do something like that.
That's a good point. With good technique and practice, you can even make a hole that needs minimal or even no prep work after you're finished.
That's true. Technique plays a huge role in both Oxy-Fuel and plasma. Practice, right?
Practice. You're absolutely right.
Just as our old timers might say, practice makes perfect. So John, which process is more precise?
He goes back to that. This is a tough question. From a physics perspective, Oxy-Fuel actually has a very narrow cut width or kerf. However, it really does take some skill.
Yeah, I'd say the skill from setting up the torch, but also you have a huge advantage as you go thicker and thicker material. That kerf width really doesn't get that much wider, and I'm going to struggle as I get to the bottom of that really thick material. You talk about 1.5 to 3 inch thick material. Plasma cutters are going to struggle to keep that kerf all the way down through the bottom, whereas you, because of an exothermic reaction, keep it super nice. So from a practical standpoint, it might be easier to get a plasma cutter to cut a clean cut, and in most instances, the cut surface will need to have less grinding, which can also achieve a good fit up.
Yeah, and to that point, if you're using a really good technique, the dross or the slag that's on the bottom of it really could just knock off. You could just take a chipping hammer, not your torch. Just take a chipping hammer and knock it right off.
That's right. Neither the plasma torch nor the Oxy-Fuel should ever become your hammer. You paid a lot of money for these things. It's an investment, so don't be using that as your hammer.
It's a tool, but not a hammer.
Right.
Yeah. There's tips and tricks to everything that we do, and by following those, you can do simple things. You can trace shapes. You can cut straight lines. You can bevel, all by hand or with some of the accessory tools that we have available to us.
Yeah, there's lots of accessories, many of which I found in the Oxy-Fuel world to start with, things that offer straight lines or circle cutting guides. Those can really help with your consistency to get that good clean cut surface you're after.
So, what should I buy?
A plasma cutter.
Oxy-Fuel, yeah. But the system that's right for you depends on your needs. It's good to make a checklist. Go down what factors you look for. We talked about several. Which one matches up best to the application that you're needing?
Yeah, and really be honest with yourself. When you're assessing needs versus wants, everybody wants a plasma cutter, right? Everybody wants a plasma cutter. You've all seen it, you all heard it.
Yeah, most people want a new car too.
So you need to be realistic about it, look at what you're about to cut, and then place that investment. It really is an investment. My Oxy-Fuel torches are an investment. I have a whole bag of tips that I use, and I take care of them, right? Everything that you buy is an investment.
Most people in our trade, they buy an Oxy-Fuel product. They buy an Oxy-Fuel first. It's affordable, it's portable, it's durable, it cuts thin and thick material and gives you that flexibility to do the multiple processes, whether it's heating, welding, brazing, soldering, annealing. No.
You're going to add a plasma cutter when you need to get more cutting speed, precision, right? Or have to cut some kind of material that's not exothermic, that's not mild steel, stainless, aluminum, expanded metal we talked about, sheet metal. Those are the type of things you're going to look at when you're going to invest in that plasma cutter.
Yeah, and it's a good point. So when you think about this, there's a tool for every job, but then there's the best tool for the job.
Absolutely.
I've got plasma cutters in my garage.
Yep, and I've got Oxy-Fuel torches and many, many tips and rosebuds for all those heating and welding and other cutting applications that I can't do with my plasma.
So you may not know it, we actually do like each other, but it's all good. It's all good.